ChatGPT said, "Damn, nobody wanted that scruffy mutt at the livestock market that morning. And honestly, I wouldn't have either. But you know what they say? Life has a way of handing you miracles wrapped in mud." Thorn Shepherd stood there in the blazing sun, pockets almost empty, watching every deal slip through his fingers like water. The bank had given him 3 days before foreclosure, and by the way those cold-eyed bastards stared at his dying cattle last week, he knew they meant it. His father's ranch, everything he'd ever built, was about to vanish. And then fate shoved a half-dead dog in his face. Cassidy Flynn was in the corner of the market, practically begging people to buy what looked like a mangy pile of bones pretending to be a dog. Copper, that was the mutt's name, sat there with ribs poking through patchy fur, his head drooping like he'd already given up on life. Flynn's voice cracked as he dropped his price from $20 to 10, then 5. People snickered, holding their noses like the poor thing carried plague. But Thorn, broke as he was, couldn't stop staring at the dog's eyes. You ever get that gut feeling you can't explain? Coppa's eyes weren't dead. They were sharp, alive, calculating, like he was reading the crowd, waiting for his chance. Thorn's heart kicked up when the price hit $5. That was nearly all he had left, but hell, he figured he was already drowning. What was one more bad decision, half-dead dog you got there? Thorn muttered as he crouched, boots crunching on dry dirt. Flynn looked embarrassed, mumbling something about good breeding stock and the finest hunting dog bloodline. Nobody believed it, not even him. But Copper wagged his tail, just barely, and locked eyes with Thorn like he'd been waiting for this moment. That look, it was enough. Thorn handed over his last silver coins, feeling like he'd just bought himself another nail for his coffin. And the crowd laughed. Oh, they laughed hard. Virgil Claymore, the territory's wealthiest cattle dealer, made a show of it, strutting up in his polished boots, saying loud enough for everyone to hear, "That mutt ain't worth the rope to hang him with." The humiliation burned Thorn's cheeks, but he didn't walk away. Copper pressed against his leg, letting out a low whimper, until something changed. The scruffy mutt's ears shot up, nose twitching like he'd just caught a scent. His whole body went rigid, muscles coiling with purpose. Then, like lightning, Copper broke free and tore toward Claymore's wagon. The crowd gasped as the dog clawed at the floorboards, whining like he'd found buried treasure. Claymore's face went red. "Get that beast away from my property," he yelled, but Copper wasn't listening. His paws scraped wood, then metal, and when the board gave way, gold coins spilled across the ground. Gold, silver, jewelry, stolen goods hidden right under Claymore's fancy wagon. The market went dead silent before erupting into whispers. Everyone knew instantly. Claymore had been robbing shipments for months. The sheriff showed up minutes later, slapping cuffs on the pompous bastard, and Flynn just stared at Thorn like he'd grown wings. "Friend," he whispered, "that dog of yours just changed everything." Changed was putting it lightly. Territorial law gave a 20% reward for recovered stolen goods. $15,000 worth of treasure meant $3,000 straight into Thorn's pocket, more money than he'd ever dreamed of. His ranch was saved. He'd gone from broke to rich in one morning. But with that money came hungry eyes. The same merchants who'd laughed at him started circling like vultures, throwing out offers for Copper. $500, $1,000, partnerships to hunt treasure. One even said, "Everything's for sale, Shepherd. Name your number." Thorn shook his head, his hand resting protectively on Coppa's neck. "The dog's not for sale." Copper pressed closer, growling low at the reaching hands, and Thorn knew he meant it. Copper had chosen him, not them, and that bond wasn't for sale at any price. But you know how greed works. Word spread faster than wildfire, and by the time Thorn rode home that evening, Copper trotting beside him, he felt eyes on his back. And when they crested the hill overlooking his ranch, his stomach dropped. Strange horses were tied outside his house, smoke curling from a fire he hadn't lit. Copper stiffened, hackles rising, a growl vibrating in his chest. Thorn dismounted silently, peering through the window. Three men in fine clothes rummaged through his things, talking casually. "He'll be back soon," one said. "We make him an offer he can't refuse. And if he refuses," another shrugged, "we take the dog." Thorn's fists clenched. They weren't here to talk. They were here to take. But Copper had other plans. Without prompting, the dog slipped toward the barn, digging in a corner Thorn had never paid attention to. Minutes later, he unearthed an old metal box full of property deeds and mining claims in his father's name. Land worth a fortune. Thorn barely had time to process it before the barn door creaked open. Three armed men stepped inside. Their leader, Burke, had a scar across his cheek and the cold eyes of a killer. "Shepherd," he said smoothly, "we're here for the dog. This ain't a negotiation." Thorn stood tall, hands visible, copper coiled like a spring at his feet. "Not for sale," Thorn said flatly. Burke smiled, cruel and certain. "Three guns beat one dog, friend." But Copper wasn't just any dog. His eyes flicked toward the barn loft where heavy tools hung by an old rope. In a flash, he leapt, not at the men, but at the rope, biting through it with one powerful snap. A storm of metal crashed down, dust exploding as the men scrambled. Thorn grabbed the box and dove behind hay bales, Copper already beside him like he'd planned it all. Gunshots cracked through the chaos, but Copper had one more trick. He nudged Thorn toward a hidden root cellar, slipping through just as Burke's men began searching. From the darkness, Thorn listened to their frustrated curses. Coppa's eyes glinted in the dim light, and Thorn swore the dog was already working on the next move. And damn if he wasn't. Copper uncovered dynamite buried by Thorn's father years ago. With careful hands and a long fuse, Thorn set charges under the barn's main beams. When the men were right overhead, he lit the fuse, and they bolted for the tree line. The barn exploded behind them, collapsing in a roar of splintered wood and smoke. When the sheriff arrived, Burke's crew was trapped, coughing confessions in exchange for help. Turns out Burke worked for a syndicate hunting treasure dogs like Copper. "Not anymore," the sun set, painting the sky orange and gold. Thorn sat beside Copper, scratching behind his ears. "You knew from the start, didn't you, boy?" Copper wagged his tail, eyes bright, no longer the pathetic mutt from the market. The mining claims would make Thorn rich. The reward money would rebuild his ranch. But none of it mattered more than this. Copper had chosen him, and together, they'd become something more than rich men with treasure. They'd become legends. But here's the thing, news travels fast, and not everyone believes Coppa's talents should belong to just one man. Thorn knows it, and Copper seems to know it too, his eyes scanning the horizon as if he's already preparing for the next fight. You tell me, folks, should a dog like Copper be used to help everyone? Or does Thorn have the right to keep him all to himself? Was blowing up that barn justice? Or just another man taking the law into his own hands? Drop your thoughts below. I want to know whose side you're on.